They told me I wasn't immediate family and left me standing outside, star map in hand, while my granddaughter searched the crowd for me. That was the day I stopped being silent. You think betrayal is loud? No, it's quiet, polished, and delivered with a smile. The morning was so thick with fog that even the lighthouse beam looked tired, dragging its yellow eye across the harbor before it found my kitchen window. I was at the counter, flour sifting between my fingers, the smell of lemons already in the air. It was supposed to be a good day. I had promised Isla I would be there front row, cheering louder than anyone when she stepped onto that school stage. She had practiced her lines in my living room for weeks, her little hands spread wide, her voice carrying more confidence than she knew she had. I had imagined the moment so clearly. Me holding a bright bouquet of yellow tulips from the Saturday market, the cake I baked cooling in the back seat of my car, and the gift I had kept hidden for weeks, the star map. It was not just any map. I had drawn it myself on heavy black paper, each constellation painted in pale, glowing pigment, so it would shine in the dark. Orion, Cassiopeia, the Big Dipper, all the shapes Isla loved to trace with her finger when we sat outside on summer nights. A map of her favorite sky, fixed forever. The stars exactly as they had appeared on the night she was born. I wanted to give it to her after the performance, to tell her, "You will never be lost if you remember how to look up." The phone buzzed on the counter, and I wiped my hands on my apron before picking it up. The message was short, polished, the kind of text that wears a polite face to hide the slap underneath. "You're not needed at this event. Parents only at the award ceremony. Thanks for understanding." No greeting, no explanation. Just Danielle Carter's voice in my head, smooth and efficient, cutting me out, without even needing to raise her tone. For a moment, I kept reading it, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something kinder. The flower in the bowl clumped under my hands. The tulips in the vase by the window seemed to lean away from me. I had raised Gavin alone after his father died young, worked double shifts at the library, kept the mortgage paid, kept him fed, clothed, dreaming. When he was older, I signed the papers to give his marketing startup its first investment, telling myself it was just money, and what mattered was that I believed in him. When he and Danielle had asked me to move in 4 years ago, they had said all the right things. "You'll be lonely by the water, Mom. Isla would love having you close. We'll take care of each other." I had imagined family dinners, shared mornings, helping Isla with homework, and the comfort of hearing Gavin's voice in the next room. The truth turned sour slowly, like milk left out overnight. I became the one who cleaned the kitchen after their parties, folded laundry they forgot in the dryer, kept the fridge stocked. My pension and savings dripped into their bills as if that was my duty. And when I spoke, really spoke, about what I thought or needed, the air went still, as if I'd said something impolite. Now, this. I sat at the table, phone still in my hand, the light from the lighthouse moving over the wall like a pendulum. Part of me wanted to reply, something sharp, something that would let Danielle know I understood exactly what she was doing, but my fingers hovered above the keys and did not move. Because I knew, as I had known in other moments of quiet humiliation, that the fight they wanted was not the one I was willing to give. Sometimes silence was not surrender. Sometimes it was armor. I thought of Isla again last August. The two of us lying on a blanket in the backyard, our faces turned to the night sky. Her voice was a whisper, naming each constellation the way other children might list friends at school. I had told her that stars were stories, and if you learned the patterns, you could always find your way. She had gripped my hand then, the small, warm weight of it making me feel like I was still needed. I put the phone down without replying. I took the tulips from the vase and set them on the counter, away from the flower dust. The cake would not be finished today. The star map would stay wrapped in its box, hidden in the drawer under my sewing kit. Outside, the fog thickened, swallowing the harbor. The lighthouse beam turned again, slow and unblinking, its light sweeping the window before passing on. I watched it go and thought, some lights are warnings, some are guides, and some tell you, you're not welcome. By the time the fog had burned away, the kitchen felt colder than it had in the morning. The tulips still sat on the counter, their yellow heads heavy, bending, as though they'd heard the message too. I didn't need Danielle's text to remind me where I stood in this house. There had been signs for years, small, cutting exclusions, that came dressed as oversights, Mother's Day lunches that never happened because we thought you might want the day to yourself. Family outings recapped to me over the kitchen counter with a polite, "Oh, you would have loved it," as if I'd been invited in spirit. Birthdays marked by perfunctory text messages, instead of a seat at their table. I reached for the narrow cabinet above the fridge, the one where I kept my records. Gavin had teased me once for being old-fashioned about paperwork, but I kept everything. Receipts, copies of checks, bank transfer slips. There was a neat folder marked Gavin Carter Investments. Inside, the paper still smelled faintly of printer ink, even after years. I ran my fingers over the first set of documents, the $25,000 I had wired to help him launch his startup. The early investor letters came next, Gavin's handwriting scrawled at the bottom, "We'll make you proud." At the time, I'd believed him. Another folder, Isla Education. Tuition payments for her private school, camp fees, boxes of pencils, and sketchbooks. I had wanted her to have every opportunity her father once did, and more. I was halfway through a stack of grocery receipts when I heard the sound of hurried footsteps on the porch, followed by a rapid knock. When I opened the door, Isla stood there, cheeks flushed from the chill, a thermos in one hand, and a rolled-up piece of paper clutched in the other. "Grandma," she said between breaths, "I forgot my project at your place." Her eyes darted past me into the hallway. She always looked at my room first, as if it held all the things that mattered. "Mom said you might be busy today," she added, "but I told her you'd still come to the ceremony." I felt the words like a knot tightening in my chest. "Did you now?" I said, stepping aside to let her in. She shook her head, pulling the thermos open. The smell of warm cocoa floated up, rich and sweet. Somewhere outside, gulls were calling over the harbor, their voices sharp against the still air. "Here," she said, unrolling the paper she'd been holding. "I made this for science class. It's a comet. Mom says you know all the old stars." The drawing was bold, a streak of silver and white against a dark blue sky. The tail glittered faintly where she'd used some kind of metallic pencil. "I do know them," I said, "but I think you're catching up." She grinned, then bit her lip as if she'd revealed too much. "Will you bring it before lunch?" she asked, referring to the project. "I don't want to miss showing it." I hesitated. I could picture Danielle's face if I turned up. Her lips pressed into that polite smile she uses like a paperweight, holding the conversation in place until I leave. Still, I said, "I'll try." The truth was, in this house, trying meant getting as far as the front door before someone reminded me I didn't belong. Isla hugged me quickly before darting back outside. The door closed behind her, and the cocoa scent lingered in the air, like something warm that didn't want to stay. I stood there for a long time, comet drawing in my hand, listening to the gulls fade into the distance. In my head, I could already hear Danielle's voice, smooth as glass. "Thank you for understanding." By late morning, the drizzle had settled in like it meant to stay. The road shimmered under the thin rain, and the lighthouse beam followed me in the rearview mirror for a few miles, before it disappeared into the mist. On the seat beside me, the star map rested in its box, the corners of the wrapping soft from my hands. It felt heavier than it was, as though it had soaked up all the hours I had spent making it. I told myself I was only going to drop off Isla's project, but my cardigan was buttoned, my hair pinned neat, the tulips balanced on the floorboard. A part of me still hoped there had been a mistake in Danielle's message, that someone at the door would smile and wave me in. The school parking lot was already full shiny SUVs, a few sedans, the kind of cars that still smelled of leather even in the rain. I found a narrow space near the side gate and sat there for a moment, listening to the patter on the windshield. Inside the main entrance, a young woman in a bright scarf stood holding a clipboard. Her smile was quick but cautious. "Hello. I'm here for Isla Carter," I said. "I'm her grandmother." She glanced down the list, finger moving slowly. Then her eyes flicked up. Apologetic. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We were instructed parents only." The way she said instructed told me it wasn't school policy. Someone had made sure this was personal. "I just need to drop off her project," I said, holding out the box. She nodded, took it gently, and assured me she'd pass it along, but her body stayed between me and the hall. I stepped back into the drizzle, my umbrella still in the car. My feet carried me around the side of the building, almost without my permission. The old bike racks were still there, rusted and leaning, and one of the windows had been left open a crack. From there, I could see straight into the assembly hall. Folding chairs stretched in neat rows, the stage dressed with painted backdrops. Danielle stood near the front, her hair catching the stage lights, her laugh floating even through the rain. Gavin was beside her, one hand light at the small of her back as she spoke to a cluster of school board donors. She looked like she belonged there, polished, composed, as if the moment itself had been curated for her. I scanned the rows until I saw Isla. She was in costume, fidgeting with the hem, eyes darting over the crowd as if searching for something. For someone. For me. I felt myself move back from the window, as if the sight of her looking was more than I could stand. I didn't want her to see me standing there, wet and uninvited, watching from the edges, like a stranger. The question rose in me and refused to settle. Was I intruding? Or was I simply fighting for my place? And if it was the latter, why did it feel so much like trespassing? I walked slowly back to the car, the drizzle now clinging to my hair and sleeves. As I pulled out of the lot, the lighthouse came into view again in the distance, its beams swinging slow and patient across the water. I remembered another day, long ago, when I had stood outside that same lighthouse with a newborn Gavin in my arms. The wind had been sharp, but I'd held him close, swaying as the light swept over us. I had whispered then, as sure as I'd ever been of anything, "You will never be alone." But promises, I've learned, don't always hold the same weight for the people they're made to. By the time I reached home, the rain had eased, leaving the air smelling of wet leaves. I went straight to my room, pulled out my astronomy journal, and sat at the small desk by the window. The paper was cool under my hand, as I wrote in slow, deliberate strokes. Erased. Again. But the stars still see me. I closed the book and let it sit there, open enough for the ink to dry, as the lighthouse beam swept once more across the harbor and into my window. I had gone to the bank that morning with only a simple task in mind: update my signature card and close an old savings account I no longer used. But the clerk's polite confusion when she pulled up my file made my stomach tighten. "Mrs. Collier," she said, turning the screen slightly towards herself. "There are still recurring transfers leaving your account every month. They're labeled as Carter and Company operating expenses. Have you authorized these recently?" He blinked. "That's my son's company," I said. "I invested when it started. Years ago. It shouldn't be—" She clicked something on the screen. "According to our records, you hold an equity share. 15%. That's substantial." She looked at me as though expecting me to smile at my own fortune. 15%. I had known I'd invested enough to be more than just a casual backer. But Gavin had never once spoken of me as a partner. Never mentioned my name when the company was celebrated in the paper. The bank manager, a tall man with tired eyes, came over when she waved him. "Mrs. Collier, there's something else. I'm not supposed to share vendor details, but, well, I've known you a long time." He lowered his voice. "Your son's company recently missed a payment on a contract with a local supplier. It's not huge, but it's a sign things might be tight. Tight. The word rang like a warning bell in my head. How much have they been pulling from my account? I asked. He glanced at the screen again. Nearly $4,000 a month, steady for the last 4 years. The air in the office seemed to thicken. I thought of every grocery trip I'd made with my pension check stretched thin. Of Danielle's new dresses, Gavin's weekend golf trips, and me, cooking their dinners, folding their laundry, grateful for the scraps of time with Isla. I want all transfers stopped, I said, my voice steady now, like a beam locking onto a target. And I want legal proof of my equity. The original agreements, anything filed. And I want my stake withdrawn to my personal account. The manager nodded, signaling the clerk. Papers were printed, signatures placed. I signed each one slowly, the pen heavy in my hand, as though the ink itself was reclaiming something. By the time I walked out into the late afternoon light, the wind off the harbor was sharp enough to sting my eyes. Ruth Alvarez was at her porch next door, a basket of laundry in her arms. She waved me over. You look like someone's just told you the sky isn't blue, she said, setting the basket down. I've been giving them $4,000 a month, I said flatly. 4 years. And I own 15% of the company. Never acknowledged, never thanked, and I've just taken it back. No, her brows rose. Danielle will see this as war. I looked out at the lighthouse, its slow beam turning toward us. Then she's been waging it quietly for years, I said. Ruth tilted her head, studying me. What are you going to do now? The light swept across her face just then, illuminating the lines and shadows as if the moment itself had been marked. It's time I turned my own light on, I said, and for the first time in years, the words didn't feel like a wish. They felt like a beginning. The email came in the early afternoon, its subject line polite enough to almost fool me. Celebrating Gavin's promotion. Small family dinner. I clicked it open and read the first few lines. Faye, we'd love for you to join us for a little gathering to celebrate Gavin's promotion. Just close friends and immediate family. Dress smart, casual. The words just close friends and immediate family might as well have been written in red ink. I knew exactly what Danielle meant by that, a reminder that in her ledger of belonging, my name never quite cleared the page. The cursor blinked in my reply box for a long time before I closed the laptop. Not an hour later, the phone rang. Isla's voice was on the other end. A whisper, as if she didn't want someone in the next room to hear. Grandma, Mom says you're busy tomorrow night. But you're not, are you? I swallowed. The truth caught somewhere between my chest and my throat. No, I'm not busy, I said carefully. But I wasn't exactly invited to. I stopped myself. She didn't need the bitterness in my voice. Then, maybe I can come see you after, she said quickly, as if she was planting a seed before someone could take it away. I told her we'd see, and hung up before my voice could betray me. Later, I went to the market for bread and oranges. The rain had stopped, leaving the air damp and cool. The harbor smell drifting through the open awning. That's when I heard her. Danielle's voice smooth, warm in public, but with an edge you could only hear if you'd spent years listening for it. She was by the flower stall, talking to a woman in a green coat. I grew up with nothing, she was saying. Hand-me-down clothes, peeling paint on the porch. You can't walk into an investor meeting with that kind of image behind you. Everything has to look spotless, consistent. Or, they think you're unstable. The friend murmured something I couldn't hear. Danielle's voice lowered, but I caught it anyway. Faye's fine. She's just not part of the brand. We have to look like we're polished, tight. People invest in families that look like they already have everything. I stood behind the stack of clementine crates, the scent sharp in my nose, my hand tight around the paper bag. In that moment, the picture shifted. Beneath her control, beneath the perfectly aligned dinner tables and edited guest lists, there was fear. Not just of losing money, but of losing the image she believed was holding it all together. and in her mind, I was a crack in the surface. I walked home slowly, the bag heavier than it should have been. By the time I reached my kitchen, the lighthouse beam was sweeping the window again, tracing the same patient arc as always. I took out the hand-bound notebook I'd bought weeks ago, leather cover, thick cream pages, and placed it on the table. The astronomy journal I had always meant to make for Isla, not the one with charts and coordinates only, but something more, a map of light for when things felt dark. I began with the first page, writing in my neatest hand. Even the smallest light can guide you home. On the next page, I sketched Orion's belt, the stars in silver ink. Underneath, a quote from Sarah Williams. Though my soul may set in darkness, it will rise in perfect light. The room grew darker as I worked, but I didn't switch on the lamp. The light from the lighthouse was enough, sliding across my desk every few seconds. Steady as a heartbeat. This wasn't a gift for a birthday, or for a school ceremony, or for Danielle's approval. This was a promise in paper and ink, that even if they tried to erase me from the picture, Isla would know exactly where to find me. He came in the early evening, when the fog was starting to curl low along the harbor, and the lighthouse beam was just beginning its sweep. Gavin stood on my porch, with his hands in his pockets, not meeting my eyes. "Can we talk?" he asked. His voice had that careful softness I remembered from his teenage years, the one he used when he thought he could explain his way out of trouble. Inside, he sat at the kitchen table, glancing at the astronomy journal lying open. "Mom, the company's been struggling since you pulled the funding. Danielle's family put in a lot. They just want things to stay stable." I leaned back in my chair. "Stable for them, you mean? It's not like that," he said quickly. "It's just when things get tight, everyone pitches in. We were desperate. Desperate enough to sign my name to a donation I never made?" He froze, his eyes flicking up sharply. "It was a fundraiser. For the school. I thought you'd want to be part of it." In my absence?" I asked, with my name printed in the program like I was gone already. His shoulders slumped. "We were desperate. I thought you'd understand." "I understand perfectly," I said. My voice was calm now, and that seemed to unsettle him more than if I'd shouted. "You and Danielle have been using my money, my name, and my silence for years. But you forgot something. I'm not gone yet." He swallowed. "Mum, I'm placing my stake into a trust," I said, sliding a folder across the table. "It's for Isla. She'll have it when she's old enough to steer by her own stars." He looked down at the papers, the weight of the words settling between us. "That's not fair to us," he said finally. "And this?" I asked, tapping the folder. "This is me making sure fairness has a place somewhere in this family." He left without touching the tea I'd made. The sound of the door closing was quieter than I expected, but the space it left behind was enormous. 2 nights later, I walked down to the lighthouse for the public astronomy night. The air was crisp, the kind of cold that sharpened every sound. Folding chairs had been set up on the pier. A small crowd gathered under strings of dim lights. I took a front row seat, feeling the occasional curious glance. I didn't care. When Isla stepped up to the microphone, she was wearing her favorite scarf, the one with tiny embroidered stars. She cleared her throat and began her speech about constellations, her voice carrying easily in the night air. Halfway through, her eyes found me. Just for a moment, her face lit with something that had nothing to do with the lighthouse. From the side, I saw Danielle standing stiffly near the organizers, her lips pressed tight. She noticed me, but she said nothing. The lighthouse beam swept slowly over the crowd, over Isla's face, over mine. I let it rest there for as long as it would, the light warm against the chill. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was on the outside looking in. The invitation didn't come from an email this time. It came from Isla herself, her voice bright on the phone. "Grandma, will you sit in the front row for my school concert, please?" I could hear the hope threaded through her words, fragile and fierce at once. "Of course," I told her. Front row, the auditorium smelled faintly of varnished wood and paper programs. People were still finding their seats when Gavin appeared at my side, holding a paper cup. "Coffee," he said, offering it like a peace offering. Not an apology that would have required words he wasn't ready to say. I took it anyway. "Thank you." He nodded, glancing toward the stage. The weight of unsaid things sat between us like a second cup. Neither of us could drink. 2 rows back, Danielle sat with her perfect posture and her controlled smile, speaking quietly to a woman beside her. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. I could feel the tension radiating forward. A taut string stretched across the rows. The lights dimmed, and the chatter softened into silence. The first notes of the orchestra filled the space, hesitant at first, then sure. The children sang, their voices weaving through the cold air. I found Isla in the second row of the choir, her eyes searching. When the final chord faded, applause thundered. Cameras flashed. And then Isla broke from her place, running straight into my arms. The stage lights glinting off the scarf at her neck. "You came," she whispered against my shoulder. "You always come." I pulled a small, neatly wrapped package from my bag. Brown paper tied with twine. "For you," I said, "so you always know where to find your light." She tore the paper carefully, the way children do when they want the moment to last. When she opened the astronomy journal, her breath caught. "It's like you put the sky in a book," she said, flipping pages slowly, tracing Orion with her fingertip, then pausing at a quote in the margin. I watched her lips move as she read it silently. "Even the smallest light can guide you home." She closed the book gently, as though afraid the stars might spill out. "I'll keep it forever," she said. The flash of a camera went off somewhere behind us, but I didn't turn. The moment was ours. Later, I walked home alone. The winter sky stretched wide and clean above me. The lighthouse beam turned slowly over the harbor, but tonight, it wasn't the only light I followed. The stars were out in their hundreds, sharp and steady, as if someone had traced them by hand, and for the first time in a long while, I felt as though I belonged exactly where I was. The kitchen was quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator. Outside, the harbor was a sheet of black glass, broken only by the sweep of the lighthouse beam. I stood at the sink, cradling a mug between my hands, staring out at the winter sky. Stars sometimes burn out, I thought. They collapse, vanish into themselves, but their light travels on, crossing years, centuries, reaching eyes that never knew them. That is the truth about love too. It does not always stay where you can see it, but it leaves a trail you can follow. My phone buzzed on the counter. Gavin's name lit the screen. "I'll acknowledge you at the next shareholder meeting. I want to do better." I read it twice, feeling the distance between his wanting and his doing. Then, I typed my reply. "Then start." I set the phone down and let the words settle like stones in the tide. Later, Ruth and I sat outside, wrapped in blankets against the cold. She poured us each a measure of port, the glass catching the light as the beam swept past. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. The ocean was restless tonight, churning in the dark, but the lighthouse kept its rhythm, throwing light over the waves, then pulling it back, again and again. In my mind, I could see Isla in her room, the quilt I made draped over her shoulders, the star map glowing above her bed. She'd be reading by flashlight, just as I had when I was her age, making a private world out of paper and light. The night air was sharp, carrying the faint scent of salt and wood smoke. I tipped my head back, looking at the sweep of stars. Some lights fade, some are blocked, but the ones worth keeping you fight for, and they guide you home. I've learned that love and loyalty are not proven by how quietly you endure mistreatment, but by how firmly you stand for your worth. Family is not just blood, it's the people who show up, who remember you, when the lights are off and the cameras are gone. As we grow older, it's easy to believe that our role is to give until we are empty. But life is too short to be lived in someone else's shadow. We have the right to set boundaries, to choose where our light shines, and to ensure our legacy reaches those who will treasure it. The stars taught me this even when you can't see them. They still guide. If stories like mine resonate with you, subscribe to our channel for more grandma revenge stories that will stay with you long after the last word.